Alright, so here we have a 1994 Chevy Suburban. What we're going to be doing is motor mounts. So if you want to see doing motor mounts from start to finish, go ahead and click here. But this video will be about the part that's in the title. So if you do see parts change from old to new, it's because there will be multiple videos of different parts for tearing the front end apart and putting it back together. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the shock. I have some 1/2-inch bolts here at the bottom. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and remove the bolts on the other side. And I'm going to go ahead and remove our inner fender well. A little cover. Alright, so now I want to remove the top of the shock. So I have a 15mm bolt on top and then the threaded stud for the shock. So we're just going to go ahead and see if we can loosen up that 15. Alright, so the other side we wrestled with, so we're going to use the same technique that did the job over there. So first I'm going to spray some penetrant oil on the top of our stud right there for our shock. And then I got a pair of vice grips. I'm going to go down and I'm going to clamp the rod, the shock rod, right before it goes into the shock body housing, so I can lock the rod up. So I'm going to go ahead and use my vice grips on that rod. Alright, so I have my 15mm socket and a long extension. Alright, so we got our shocks off. Alright, so now we're ready to pull our shock off. Alright, so we got our upper bushing. Alright, so this is how, basically what we were doing. This is sandwiched up there in the frame, and when you turn the nut, this whole shaft spins. Right, so you do have a little hexagon kind of deal here, or like an oval, rectangle-ish kind of. No socket fits it. There is a specialty socket, but what I did is I took my vice grips and I clamped down on this bar, right, our actual shock rod. That way I could spin the nut off the top, and then you just use the 1/2-inch impact to do that. All right, so here we have a coil spring tool. This is to compress the coil spring so that we can release the lower control arm. So we'll go ahead and get it positioned up there. And so I'm just going to take the tool apart and set it up in there and then reposition it back in. All right, so now we need to remove our sway bar. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and, these are 1/2-inch. right, so now we have a cotter pin. All right, cotter pin. Now I want to remove our nut. All right, so let's separate this. I'm going to go ahead and hit it right here with a hammer. Oh man. All right, so I have a 15/16 wrench and a socket. I'm going to go ahead and loosen up our lower control arm bolts. I'm just going to put my nut back on here just to kind of keep everything from falling too fast for me. Go ahead and tap my bolt out. All right, so we can kind of wiggle our control arm down. All right, so we have our spring. And our ball joint's the only thing holding this on. Come on, buddy. You were like falling out of there a minute ago. All right. All right, so here we have our new lower control arm that we got from Auto Parts Direct to You. All right, so everything is the same. This is a fully loaded control arm. It's got your ball joint and your bushings already installed. The only thing that we need to move over is our bump stop, but we'll go ahead and move this over after it's already installed in the vehicle. But basically, we just have one bolt on the bottom to pull off and move it over. But we'll go ahead and kind of leave ourselves some arm room while we're putting the spring in, so we'll kind of keep that off of it for right now. All right, so we'll go ahead and set our new control arm with our spring back up into its pocket. Okay, that's good. That's fine. That's enough. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and replace our sway bar link with a new one that we got from Auto Parts Direct U. So we got washer, bushing, another bushing, washer, sleeve, another washer and bushing. All right, so now we're going to tighten up our lower ball joint. All right, so now we'll go ahead and tighten our lower control arm bolts. All right, so now we're going to do the upper control arm. So the first thing we're going to do is remove our bracket here for our brake line. These are 11 millimeter nuts there. Oh, looks like it's spinning on the bottom. I need a wrench. All right, we might have to do that. I can't really get in here, so we might have to loosen this so we can wiggle this up and down. So let's go ahead and remove our upper ball joint. All right, so we want to remove our cotter pin. All right, so now we need to smack our knuckle there so we can release the ball joint. Try not to hit that. All right, so now we want to see if we can get in here and get this. The one thing I do want to mention is the brake line here. It is pretty rotted already. It is cracked up. I'm not really too concerned about it. It's something I'm going to replace here very soon. Removing the caliper and setting it off to the side would avoid any of this. But I'm just trying to, not take as many parts as I have to, knowing that I'm going to have to replace this in the near future. All right, so I'm just kind of trying to make a mental note of where of where our eccentric, our cam bolts, this will be for the alignment, just so we can kind of get it back in the same spot. But you can tell it's pretty worn. I mean, basically it's just getting it close so I can get it to an alignment in shop. All right, so we'll go ahead and remove those bolts. All right, so here we have our new control arm that we got from Auto Parts Direct to You. All right, so you can see where the old one was pretty worn, pretty much every bushing and the ball joint. All right, so it's like the only thing we need to transfer over is this little bracket that held our speed sensor in for our brakes. All right, so we'll go ahead and remove this and put it onto this side. All right, so we're ready to put our new control arm in. All right, so now we're ready to put our control arm back in, our upper control arm. All right, so we just want to make note, we can see how the eccentric was sitting, the angle it had by how it left the shiny where it was making contact. And you can almost make out, you know, the little grease line. Same with this one, you can see the angle. You see it was slightly angled. All right, so we want to make sure that we get these back as close as we can. I mean, it still needs an alignment, but this is just trying to make it a little bit easier for the guy doing the alignment, so he doesn't have to really adjust a ton of stuff. All right, so we're going to try to aim for putting it back in the same position. The same with the front one. This is the same way. So we kind of have an idea of where those eccentrics need to sit. All right, so we'll go ahead and put our control arm up in there. All right, so now we want to go ahead and reattach our brake line. All right, so now we want to go ahead and tighten our upper ball joint. All right, we want to go ahead and put our cotter pin in. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and tighten our uppers up. Alright, so now we want to go ahead and pull our spring compressor tool out. Alright, so here we got our new shock from Auto Parts Direct to You. We'll go ahead and install that now. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and put our bushings on. Alright, so we'll go ahead and feed our shock up through. Make sure it goes through our upper hole. Go ahead and put my in. Okay, so I just need to lift up the, compress it a little bit to be able to get the shock to mount up on the bottom and on the top. So I'm just a little shy on the bottom bolts. Okay, so now we're ready to tighten the top of our shock down. So I'm going to go ahead, this is a 15 for this new shock bolt. I'm going to go ahead and just see how far it'll go on. But when it came off, the shaft starts spinning, so the same thing's going to happen to us now, except we can't use the vice grips on the shock because then we'll damage the actual rod, and then that'll damage the shock seals itself. Right, so we still seem to be tightening. I'm just checking how much thread is exposed with my finger, see if I'm making any headway. And it is tightening up, so. All right, so I'm just going to make sure it's tight with the tool. All right, so this is the actual tool for doing a shock. It's got kind of a rectangle with round edges. This fits right on top of the shock. Now, it wouldn't fit on the old ones because it was so rusty. So what we want to do is put our 15 on our nut, and we can hold our nut, and then we're actually spinning the rod to tighten it. All right, so we were pretty tight. All right, so it tightened up pretty good on its own. But that would be the proper way to take the shock off, is with this tool. Okay, so we got our tool in. Our spring is loose. All right, so we're going ahead. We do have a broken sway bar link here, so we're going to go ahead and remove that. Looks like it's pretty bad there. All right, so now that we got it all set up, and we got our new control arms in, our upper control arm, it's ready to go to the alignment shop to get realigned.